This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. We are live on Facebook. Thank you everyone for being back here on coffee number 5. Everyone knows how hard for me was to start this journey as an entrepreneur and how important it was for me to hire a team. And I talk about this so many times, and I was interviewed about this, and you guys know that I believe in creating a company culture by design, that we need to plan before we decide how our company is going to be and how we're going to interact with our team. Today, I want to talk to something really close to my heart, and this is leadership. For that, we have Jay Weiser. I always get it wrong. And it's a Latin accent. So Jay Weiser. And welcome, Jay. Thank you so much for being here. And first of all, I want to know more about yourself and how did you become an expert and how did you come up with these 5 leadership superpowers?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me. And in terms of, how did I get to where I am? How did I become an expert? I've been consulting now for 25 plus years. And I've always worked with executives on how to help them execute and manage their strategy. And as I've done that, I've noticed most issues are not technical issues or operational issues. They're people issues, communication issues, leadership issues. Fast forward over the last year and a half, the world has been disrupted. Before that, there were other disruptions, whether 9/11, whether it was the Great Recession, whether it's a storm, there's always something going on. And it made me think about what different leadership capabilities are needed to help leaders thrive in a disruptive and uncertain environment, as well as one that's not so disruptive.
So, okay, you took a moment, you thought about this, and you came up with 5. Not 6, not 4, 5.
For those people who know me, they're like, no, Jay, you really didn't come up with 5. You probably came up with 20. And there were a lot. I started with 3, and those 3 were present futurist, experienced learner, and strategic executor. Now, you'll notice those are all paradoxes. They're opposites. And in today's world, you've got to be able to do both and thinking. It's not either this or that. Your customers expect both. Your clients expect both. So I was really good at coming up with paradoxes, and those were picked up individually. And then I said, well, what's needed to help leaders excel? What's different? You always need the communication skills, the planning skills, having a great vision, and all those things. But what's different? And as I started to condense, I said, 5 is a good number. 5 superpowers that kind of resonated. I was trying to come up with something. I said, superpowers, that's that extra, it's that extra power, it's that extra energy, is how I came up with superpowers. Mm-hmm. And, the 5 are present futurist, experienced learner, prepared risk taker, strategic executor, and accountable collaborator. And they each have a little bit of a story behind them.
Okay, can you give us a brief explanation of each one of them and why it's important in leadership?
Absolutely. So the first one is present futurist. And a present futurist has to understand what's happening today. They have to understand the environment. They have to understand the context. They have to understand the state of their business. But at the same time, they have to be able to look out into the future, envision where they're going, and at the same time, think about what trends are likely to happen, what events could disrupt their plans, and think about different possibilities. And it's balancing that tension that's so critical, Because if a leader is only focused in the present, you're going to be too short-sighted. If you're only focused in the future, it's going to sound dreamy and not anchored in reality. So having both really gives a much more robust picture of what a leader needs to be thinking about sharing with their organization so they understand what's happening. The next one is experienced learner. And that one was kind of interesting in how it originated. I wrote an article maybe about 2 years back called "Can Experience and Expertise Be Poisonous to Your Career?" And the point underlying that is you can't just rely on expertise and experience, what you did before, what you used to do, because that's not going to solve today and tomorrow's problems. So you have to use that experience and expertise, but at the same time, be open to continuous learning, being open-minded, going out and reading widely, listening to different speakers. So it's that combination that helps people get through challenging times, new opportunities.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Because I see that there is something very common right now in executives that is, I know it all. And I have all, and I'm sure you saw it too. And, you know, I have no filter for those things. And I think that what you're saying about learning is so important. I mean, most of my nights, I'm learning something. I either learning the new algorithms or something new. I just need to do it. But being so close-minded, for me, be able to lead my team means that I'm learning all the time. So I know what to expect from my team as well. If I'm not there to challenge them and them challenge me back, there is no team, there is no leadership. There is it's a synergy constantly with your team.
No, absolutely. Saying I know it all is the absolute worst thing a leader can say. Is when you say I know it all, you shut everybody else down. You don't get the creativity, you don't get the feedback, the market information, frontline information that you really need to hear. Second, when something like COVID hits, or something like the Great Recession, something comes out of the blue or seemingly out of the blue, you can't know it all. You haven't seen it before. So you have to be open to learning. And executives that were really good about this, instead of saying, I know it all, they allowed themselves to be vulnerable and say, I don't know to their people, but if they're doing it right, but I'm confident that we together can figure this out. So it's that reassurance and it's that openness that invites other people in that's so critical.
I absolutely agree. In my company, I have something that for each one of our clients, we do something every month that is called a blue sky. And I don't care if it's an executive, something about in the director level or someone, an intern, anyone who is involved in the account is in that blue sky. Because I believe that each person from their point of view see the account a little different because of what they learn and from their expertise, their age, where they're located in the world. Everyone can bring something valid to the table. Then it will be my prerogative to decide if I wanted to put it in this strategy or not. But there are so many times that you don't know where the valid information can come from, and shutting down your team, it will be a lose-lose situation for a leader.
You know, and I like the idea of blue sky because that's limitless, and that really opens things up. You know, if you were to talk to my parents, they probably said, I never stopped asking questions. And for me, curiosity, whether it's, you know, finding out how some ancient building was built, to learning about history, to listening to different leadership thinkers, I've always been amazed by what I hear. And it's not just from the experts. I've worked for consulted to major supermarket chains, and cashiers and customer service people have the best ideas. They know what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more you engage them, the better. And it's that collective mix that's so powerful.
It is. And I think that leads us to be the strategic executor.
So the strategic executor is, so let me give you a situation, something I've heard a lot. So you talk to an executive team, you talk to a CEO and you say, Mr. CEO, does your team regularly talk about strategy? And he says, oh yeah, we do it at every quarterly meeting. So I said, tell me about the meeting. He says, the first thing we do is everybody goes around the room and they say what they're doing. Now, in my head, I'm thinking show and tell. That's not a good use of time because there are other ways of sharing that information. The second thing he says, then we talk about problems, what's on fire, in different operational issues. So that's really the urgent here and now. Strategy still missing. What's the third thing you do? And he says, we review our measures. And I very often say, are these measures that have been reviewed in other meetings? Yes. So far, we've gone through a lot of the meeting, and I would question the value. So my last question is, so how much time do you spend on strategy and thinking long-term? And the answer typically is, it depends what's left. So I said, we'll say typically how much is left? Well, sometimes we only have 10 minutes. Sometimes we have 45 minutes. But it's the idea that you have to balance between strategy and execution, because what you do today is going to affect what you're able to do tomorrow. And where you're going and what you're trying to do also informs the path you need to take and what you need to do operationally. So it's finding that balance, because if that's out of kilter, you're going to have trouble executing strategy, engaging your people. You're not going to be paying attention to what's going on with your business and whether or not you're going to get to where you want to go.
I just love that we are so aligned in so many things, but you just put it so much better than me, so much prettier. And because I believe like every entrepreneur is a risk assessor.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's pretty true, because you're taking chances.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Strategy is about making choices, and every choice involves some element of risk. And having both of those, you've got to be able to weigh that. And
yeah, and you need to make smart decisions. I always think that being intelligent or smart about something is be able to put things together. And this is, I feel like a lot of businesses are having issues because they have long-term goals and short-term goals, but they forget to create a bridge in how to get from the short term to the long term. How do I get from here to here? Because those goals, you don't achieve them from one day to the next without putting work.
And the thing is, very often I refer to that as crossing the canyon. How do you get from one side to the other? And like you said, you have to build the bridge. The bridge has scaffolding. So what's the underlying infrastructure and support? You have to be resilient. There's a bridge, you just don't want it to topple over, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
You want it to be able to withstand storms, which are, essentially what goes on in the market, because your goal is always to get to the other side. And you want to do it safely, ideally with your team.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have a loyalty in your team and to build that team. It's like, I feel like right now also employers are creating teams for the moment, not for the future.
Well, and the thing is, if you're not getting the full benefit of the team, if it's only focused on today.
Exactly. So how you recommend a leader? What is your suggestion for a company to grow and plan from today? I mean, of course, you're not going to give us a magic recipe because it's different for each person, each building. They have their own strategy and every company is unique. But there are strong steps to build that strategy from the today to the long goal terms. And also to be open-minded that those goals can change. I always remember like Back to the Future. The movie, like how they saw this year with big screens and everything got smaller, not big.
You know, what's funny with, Back to the Future, the approach I take, I call Back to the Future, because it's not building from today. Because if you build from today to the future, people tend to think incrementally. What do I do this year? What do I do the second year? I like to create pull. So very often the first question I'll ask an executive that I'm engaged with, let's say, Lara, it's your company, and let's go 3 years out. Going 5 years out is probably pushing it. 1 year out is too short. So let's go 3 years. And I'll say, I'm a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. In 3 years, so it's 2024, I'm writing an article on your company, and you have been wildly successful on what you set out to do. Tell me about the company. What does it look like? Who is it serving? What's its value proposition? What do customers think about it? So you're building that robust picture of the future so people know where they're heading to. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to change, but that's where you're starting. The second question I ask, from 2024, looking back, what are the 3 to 5 things that you did to help you get to that success in 2024? Third question, looking back, what were the major obstacles you had to overcome? And the fourth question is, where are you today? And how ready are you to make that journey? Now, as you think about that, how ready, then the plan is about how do you get from A to B? What do you have to do to be ready? Now that you know what the major steps are, it's this, Covey said, begin with the end in mind. So you know what you're building towards.
And sometimes those changes, actually, I had to experience it several times with my company already. You have to take risks to make those changes. Otherwise, sometimes it could mean losing different clients or letting go clients or make strategic moves inside the company. And everything is a transition period. So it's not that it's going to go from that point A to B and it's going to be an easy process. All those processes are painful.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of people think the shortest way to A to B is a straight line. And in reality, unless you're a railroad, nothing is in a straight line. There's this back and forth. A colleague of mine posted something today, and he showed a ladder and said, he put the rungs, if the rungs are far apart, you can't climb. If the rungs are close together, then rung by rung, you can work your way up to it. And I said to him, life is not like a ladder. Life is like the children's game, chutes and ladders. You go up 3, you drop down 2. You go up, you go down, you go up, you go down. And you have to adjust, and you have to adapt, and you course correct. But you know the direction where you're heading.
Yeah, and I even will say that the gap between the roads are different. So there's some that it's going to take you more time and a bigger step, and another ones that are going to be easier. So you need to watch your way.
Well, and again, if you have your eye on the prize, which is more, it's more of a direction than a destination, because that destination is going to change. And as long as you're doing that, that drives a lot of the alignment and helps keep things together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how about this change of path? Because that's something that it's really hard for a lot of people to make decisions and say, I need to change this path, or I need to stop this relationship, because there are relationships that sometimes they're great relationships with people, because people are great, but you need to make sure that the return of investment, it works for your company. And over time, as you make changes, sometimes just doesn't work. The math doesn't add up.
Well, that goes back to your point about risk. You're not going to win everything, but the thing is, are you making good mistakes? Are you learning from those mistakes? And that's the benefit, of going through that. I think the other piece, and I lost my thought there for a second. So people like change as long as it happens to somebody else, not to them. And people change only if they realize that there's greater risk or cost from not changing. That's typically the trigger. Something's at risk. Sometimes it's something to gain, but it tends to be risk and the risk of loss that moves people more. And it's sad that, you need a crisis. You need something urgent to get people to move. But sometimes, if there's trust with leadership, and leadership builds a picture of what that future can look like. And then the question is, do you want to stay where you are, or would you rather be in this future company that I just talked about? And that can create the incentive to change, because they have to see what's in it for them.
And that brings us to your fifth leadership superpower, that is to be a prepared risk taker.
So the idea of being a prepared risk taker, you talked about taking risk.
Yes.
The worst thing an entrepreneur or executive can do is just go willy-nilly and say, oh, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, because that's dangerous. Mm-hmm. But if you've done some thinking, if you've done some preparation in terms of, understanding different possibilities, in terms of building flexibility and resilience into your organization, doing a little bit of research, then that reduces the risk to something that's manageable. You're not taking, my wife will always tell me, don't use the word stupid. But that's the best word I can think of. You're not taking stupid risks.
Of course.
You're taking smart risks. And I think it's the truth. Now, you have to do both, because if you just spend all your time preparing, so it's like aim, and you never fire, then you're never going to go anyplace. And if all you're doing is firing and you're not aiming, you're shooting all over. So it's combining those two. And, you talked about making decisions. The key thing is make a decision. Inaction very often is riskier than making a decision, because you can adjust. But when a crisis hits or a challenge hits, you're like, oh, I'm going to wait and see what happens. I've never seen a good outcome from a company that says, we're going to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Let me ask you one more question, because I believe that lately there is this philosophy that everyone needs to get into leadership. It's something that it's been taught, and there's a lot of coachings to be leader, like everyone can be a leader. And honestly, I don't believe that. I mean, I believe that not everyone needs to be a leader. Like, for example, in my company, being a leader means that to get managerial positions, and have to have other skills to be a leader. So there are a lot of people, like, for example, I always give the idea of a designer, that designers are super talented many times. Not necessarily they need to be a leader. And they should be opportunities for them to grow in their space or grow economically until the same, because they're different paths. And not everyone needs to become in a managerial or leadership position to be able to grow in their career.
You know, when I think about it, I think it comes back to what do you define as leadership? And when I think about leadership, it's not just about position. And a lot of people think it's about position. My dad just turned 82. And his idea of success, because of his work experience, is did you get a raise? Did you get promoted? Did you move up? That was his benchmark. And it's very different now because people don't stay with companies. You're not taking a step at a time. And to your point, not everybody can manage other people. That's not their strength. I think leadership, though, is a mindset. Leadership can be about influence. Anybody can work and influence others. Leadership is about taking initiative. So if you define leadership differently, then it becomes more possible. You have to redefine it. Because if you think it's just about a promotion and moving up vertically, you're going to be very disappointed. I mean, I think about my own family. I have two boys like you do. And my boys are
you did your homework. You stalked me a little bit.
my boys are 21 and 25. They each have taken turns. You know, we think about our lives together. We think about the time when they were home during COVID. They've each been leaders in different ways, whether it's taking the initiative to go out and buy a smoker, which I think a lot of people did during COVID, and planning something, or talking about a family decision and leading the discussion, and influencing that. So I think it's important to have a broader definition of leadership that's engaging, that's inclusive. And I think that's appealing.
And the leadership is not only related to the workspace.
Yes.
I mean, you can be a leader in your social life with a social group of friends, or a leader in the family, or just lead a conversation in the family. But it doesn't mean that you need to get into a managerial position to be a leader.
Well, and that's the thing. Managers are not always leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think what, you know, the quote I heard is, you lead people, you don't manage people.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
You know,
but this is a very common interview. How many people you manage?
Yeah.
That my husband is a director in a company, and is in every interview he took through his lifetime, how many people you manage?
Well, and the thing is, I think the better question is, how many people have you led?
Yep.
How many leaders have you worked with? Because the fact that I'm, you know, if I say, you know, I'm a store manager in a supermarket, I manage 100 people. That doesn't make me a leader.
Absolutely not. And also, I always say that being a leader is a responsibility. Your responsibility is to be a mentor also. If
Yes.
you're not ready to mentor others, you're not in a position to lead others.
No, I agree with that 100%, because again, you're not building anything behind you. You're not helping people grow, which I think is the role of a leader. If a leader is preparing for the future, they're preparing other leaders.
Exactly.
And the fact of the matter is, if you think about an employee value proposition,
Mm-hmm.
with people changing jobs.
Don't get me started with that, because that we can have a whole conversation on the short-term turnover, that they feel like this is the only way to grow.
Well, and companies are not loyal to people anymore. I mean, I remember, you know, 30 years ago when I graduated business school, the speaker said, you work for You Incorporated, and You Incorporated will be hired for periods of time by different companies. And the comment made, as long as you're growing, as long as you're learning, as long as you see other opportunities, that's good. The fact that you move between companies doesn't matter as much. Now, having said that, I believe in relationships. And if you are a transactional employee, then people are not going to invest in you. People are going to see that. So for me, it's always been about a relationship. And
For me too. For me too, it's always create relationship and work culture. And in my company, we make an extra effort in how we build those relationships. But you're totally right. You can see it from far away. Who's not there? Who are there to do their job 9 to 5, and they're out and looking out for the next opportunity.
Well, and you think about it, companies who only have people who are 9 to 5 are going to be very limited in what they can do.
Yep, I cannot agree with you. Jay, I think I could be talking to you for hours and hours and hours, but my thing with podcasts is that this podcast needs to be a car ride in Los Angeles. Because if I get out of the car, I will never go back to listen to it. But I always will wait for a few minutes to finish. So I think that this car ride got to their end. But I really hope that we keep in touch, because I'm fascinated with what you do and your philosophy and these superpowers.
No, thank you very much. And I agree with you. I think, I talked about each step being a rung. You got to take it in chunks, and it's much easier to digest. And I would love to come on again. You talked about us being aligned, and I think aligned people can really help each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here and having coffee with me.
Thank you.
It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.